Hey friends, welcome back to the Birthing Bestie blog, where we talk about real topics pertaining to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, motherhood, doula life, and just real life in general. Here on the blog, we don't shy away from talking about the hardships of relationships and life. Instead, we embrace you with open arms. And today, I want to talk to the mamas. I want to talk to those of you who are expecting, whether it be your first child, your fifth child, or anywhere in between. And specifically, if you are choosing to deliver with a care provider who's a little more medicalized. So maybe a care provider or an OB in the hospital setting. I think that you can take some great tips away from this, no matter what type of provider you have. But I've seen this really work well for clients, friends, and people who are delivering in a hospital setting, and especially who have a little more of a medicalized care provider. So I want to talk about opening lines of communication with your care provider. So for me, a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, whether we're just texting back and forth, checking in and chit-chatting about different stuff, or we're sitting down and mapping out a birth plan, a lot of times after we talk through scenarios, I recommend questions to ask their care provider. I give them my take, what I've seen in the past, talk through their wishes and experience specifically, but I always follow it up with say, it's a great question to ask your care provider. There's a couple of reasons why I think that's such an important piece. One is because you need to have a good relationship and a good rapport with your care provider. Even if you have a doula, even if you have a wonderful support team, it's still really important to talk about your wishes, your desires, and your needs with your care provider. So even if I talk with a client and we get on the same page and we know how they feel about XYZ policy or procedure, I always recommend you still talk with your care provider about that. When you are talking with your care provider about different things, it's really important how we frame questions. I say it all the time, and it's so true for each and every aspect of birth, but language really, really matters. And that is especially true when you are talking to your care provider, especially in your prenatal appointments, especially as you're talking through wishes, desires, and questions. When you are having these conversations with your care provider, if you are coming to them with a question specifically, I have a couple tips that are going to help you not only have a better conversation, but most likely get to a place where you feel heard and respected and that you're having an actual discussion. So, tip number one is to start your question with some information. Share that you have done your research, again, whether it's independent, you've talked to a doula, maybe you're taking a childbirth education class. Make sure you let your care provider know leading into your question that you know your stuff. This isn't a blind question. The important piece is tip number two, where you want to stay away from those yes or no questions. Leave your questions open-ended. Again, it always helps if you can show that you are a smart cookie, you're doing your research, you're talking to the right people, you're reading the right things. But number two, do not ask yes or no questions. Leave it open-ended. It allows for more conversation and you get a better idea of how that provider feels or thinks about whatever it is you're asking, rather than them saying, nope, we do the glucose drink here at 28 weeks. I mean, if you said, are there other options? They may say, nope, this is what we do here. We know that there are other options, and so that doesn't invite as much conversation. When we're thinking about the other example with the delayed cord clamping, you don't necessarily want to say, I really want to do delayed cord clamping. How long do you allow for me to wait until we clamp it? That gives them the time, 30 to 60 seconds, and then moves on. It does not open up, it does not invite anybody for additional conversation and back and forth. And that's what you want to stay away from with your care provider and really with anyone that you're talking about in any trying to figure out any of your birth preferences. It should be a conversation. It should be back and forth. So staying away from yes or no only questions is a really great way to do it. Another consideration that goes right along with tip number 2 is not only finding the importance to ask open-ended questions, but also there are certain words that I really recommend that you stay away from. You don't use in this conversation at all. Those are going to be phrases and words like, will you let me? Do you allow? Anything that really takes your power away. We know no matter where you're birthing, you get the final say. Medical advice is just that, and I'm not dismissing medical advice. It's very important to listen to your care provider, but again, it should be a conversation. So you ultimately get to make these decisions of how things unfold in your birth and what your next steps are. And tip number 3 is when you're sure about something that you want to have be part of your birth or not, ask them to mark it in your chart. You can have a physical birth plan. You can have your advocates there with you, reminding your care provider of what your wishes are. But having these conversations ahead of time and asking them to put it in your chart, one is just one more touch point for anybody who's going to be caring for you at that time to be able to put eyes on it and visually see what your wishes are. But it also reminds them that this is what you want and you've made this decision already. Now, let's say, for example, maybe you want to talk about something where you just want to learn more about it and you're wanting to get more information from your care provider about this topic. So maybe you haven't made your final decision yet. Maybe you're just looking to talk through it and get a little bit more information, which then you can also gauge kind of where your care provider stands on, whatever this topic is. If you've not yet made your decision, you can just say, thank you. This is really helpful. Do you have other resources that I can continue my research? That's always a great option if you are maybe feeling pressured into making a decision at that moment, or if you're truly just still kind of mulling things over, you can always ask for them to share additional resources with you, whether it be books, podcasts, articles, whatever that is. You can kind of just, instead of following up with, can you put that in my chart? You can say, do you have additional resources that you recommend as I continue to think about this? So for example, when it comes to, let's say, delayed cord clamping, if this is something that you're really interested in having at your birth, it's a good conversation to talk to your care provider about. Now, this is going to be one of those topics that you are going to have varying opinions with more medicalized or sometimes with hospital-based providers. Sometimes that is because of hospital policy. Sometimes it's just because of lack of knowledge of research. But depending on who you talk to and who is on call when you deliver, they might have differing opinions of how long is appropriate for you to delay that cord. Now, whether or not you have done your own research, whether that be independently doing your research, reading, or looking up things online, talking to other people, working with a doula or taking a childbirth education class, it's still really important for you to have this conversation with your care provider. For example, if it's really important for you to wait to clamp your baby's cord until the blood has moved all the way through and it is white and it is done pulsating, then that's a conversation you need to have with your care provider so you can express those wishes. So in this specific situation, I would recommend you talking to your care provider, asking questions to get a feel for what their opinions and feelings are on waiting until that cord is white, to see if the hospital does have any policies on it, which, by the way, we know hospital policy is not law, and it doesn't always match what up-to-date research is. So how I would recommend you frame this question is at your appointment, at the end, when they say, what kind of questions do you have for me? You can say, I've been doing a lot of research on delayed cord clamping. It's something I'm really interested in. I've read about the benefits. I love that. possibility for myself and for my baby. So what I really want to do is wait until the blood moves through. I understand that can be, it can vary in how much time something like that takes, but it's important to me to have it wait all the way through as long as myself and baby are healthy immediately postpartum. And then I would say, instead of saying this is where you don't want to get caught up in that yes or no kind of answer, you don't want to say, is that okay with you? Or is that something I can do? Phrase it more open-ended. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you can mark in my chart that is important to me? Again, with these conversations and these questions that you're going to be asking your care provider, tip number one is lead off with some facts or knowledge or just framework that you have done your homework and you've done your research and that you've ultimately probably made a decision. Step number one, start with information that you are knowledgeable on this topic. Tip number two, stay away from those yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions. State how you feel, what your preferences are. Ask them, follow it up then with the question of what do you see normally in your practice, or what is the hospital's policy on this, or what are your opinions? What's the research you've done say? Or what resources do you have for me that I can look into this further? And tip number three, if you have made your decision about whatever topic that you are having this discussion about, follow it up with, I'd like you to note it in my chart. Can you put that in my chart? Okay, mamas, I hope this was helpful, and I really hope that this helps you better guide conversations with your care provider to feel like you're really getting a robust answer and conversation and rapport built with your care provider. It's so important. Of course, if you are working through any questions or conversations with your care provider and you need a little extra help in how you can frame certain things or best ways to ask, reach out. I am always here for you. You can always slide into my DMs at ebbirthing on Instagram or email me at ebbirthing@gmail.com. I am here for you. I am rooting for you. You are going to be amazing, and you're going to have amazing communication with your care provider because now you know how to ask questions and, more importantly, how to not ask questions. Okay, let me know how it goes at your next appointment and your next conversations with your care provider, and just know I'm cheering for you. Until next time, mamas.